Victor Charles worked in 2 television programs in 1959. His first performance was in the Western Bronco titled Night Train to Denver. His role was Man on Train, and it was released on December 29, 1959. His second performance was in 77 Sunset Strip, titled Created He Them. This time he had the substantial speaking role as Bongo Benny, and it was released on January 1st, 1960. It makes perfect sense that these 2 television programs in 1959 were cast, filmed, and edited before Victor Charles performed in the Old Globe Theatre Shakespearean Festival on July 7, 1959. That most likely was the time period when Victor Charles received his equity card and became a professional actor. The Old Globe Theatre Shakespearean Festival ended on August 30th, 1959, and Victor Charles most likely went back up to Warner Brothers during September through December of 1959 to film 3 new television programs. The first television program in the 1960 decade was Sea Hunt, titled Underwater Drop, and he played the role of Seminard. It was released on February 6, 1960. His second program was GE Theater titled The Story of Judith, and he played the role of Bacchus. It was released on February 28, 1960. And his third television program was Worldwide 60, titled The Immense Design, and he was the host. It was released on March 26, 1960, and at the end of the year of 1959, Victor Charles was on his way to be a professional television actor, and he never looked back again at his family crisis for the rest of his life. My father, Sonny, was 31 years old and still a San Diego County sheriff in 1959. He once told me long ago in 1982 that he went to the San Diego County Jail to talk with his stepfather, Victor Francis, face to face, after he was first arrested on February 3, 1959. He went there for one important reason, and it was to hear him say he was innocent of all charges placed against him. As he sat there looking at his stepfather, asking him if he was innocent of his charges, Victor Francis calmly said, "I'm innocent." At the end of their short conversation and polite goodbyes, my father walked away with his head hanging low and crying, because he knew inside that he was guilty. This is what was going on behind the curtain of the Buono family in 1959. All the rest of the family members were working at their jobs and taking care of their houses and families and trying to forget this horrific, surreal situation. Victor Charles was now a professional actor who was financially providing support for my Grandma Mert and Uncle David Francis. And the newspapers continued printing about the death of Tony Mirabile. Over the years, I've read many books of actors, actresses, directors, playwriters, screenwriters, and producers of stage, television, and motion pictures. In the early years of MGM, 20th Century Fox, Paramount Pictures, Warner Brothers, and many more studios had stringent policies not to ever bring any potential talents up for a screen test if they were carrying any controversial luggage following them. The name Victor Francis Buono had appeared in numerous newspapers throughout America and across the border of Canada, and people had read about the robbery and murder of Tony Mirabile. Victor Charles was 100% innocent of his father's crimes, and the studios made his family crisis an absolute secret from motion picture fans throughout his entire career as an actor. In 1959, these are the family members connected to actor Victor Charles Buono. It was my grandma Mert, David Francis, Tony Edwards, Annie Susie, Carl Brittenbach, Uncle Malvin Ward Morris, Auntie Mary Jane Morris, Larry, Vicky, and Carla Morris, Granny Gruntz, Great-Grandpa Pete Budovich, my father Sonny, my mother Hilda, and two sisters, Teresa and Renee, and me, and my mother's father John Allen and his wife, Laura Golden, and her brother David Golden, and her half-brother Uncle Lynn, and his wife Mother Golden, and his wife Mary Golden, and their two sons Steve and John, and Uncle Ken Brown, and his wife Agnes, and their son Neil and daughter Laura. This was the surrounding family members who had to endure in this tragic episode of the Buono family. My step-grandfather, Victor Francis, was not all alone, because everyone who loved him in the family had to take the same ride with him through his tragic downfall of his now crushed life. Most of our family members were hard-working people, like my father Sonny as a San Diego County sheriff. Carl Brittenbach was a carpenter. Uncle Lynn Golden was a construction crane operator. His father, John Allen Golden, was a construction contractor. My Uncle Ken Brown was a milkman. And my Uncle Ward Morris was an independent construction contractor. I was now 6 years old, and I don't recall hearing any discussions about step-grandfather Victor Francis from the adults sitting around me. During that time, Victor Charles would pop in and out in a rush to meet up with his friends. We would also walk across Mission Boulevard to see Annie Susie and Carl at their two-story beachfront house. When looking out their second-story window, we could see the rock jetty stretching out into the Pacific Ocean, and when looking to our right, there were beautiful hills of La Jolla. And we all tried our best to live a normal life while newspapers continued printing the name of Victor Francis Buono. On August 30th, 1959, Victor Charles would be performing in the last day of the Oak Globe Theatre Shakespeare Festival. He was well on his way to being a television and motion picture actor, while his father was in jail waiting for his verdict of being found innocent or guilty of the death of Tony Mirabile. This is a very sad story of two men going in opposite paths. Victor Charles was making Hollywood history, while his father was submerging in absolute shame. The Chinese drip drops steadily kept coming from the newspapers in September, and I've always wondered if Victor Charles ever visited his father while he was incarcerated. There are so many questions at that tragic time that cannot ever be answered easily after being buried deeply in the hearts and minds. The trial jury of 10 women and 2 men still couldn't come to a decision after 8 weeks, and on September 13, 1959, the title in the newspaper read, "Mirabile Plot Jury Locked Up in Hotel." The jury couldn't come to a verdict but 3 days later, the shocking news was printed in hundreds or maybe thousands of newspapers throughout America that the jury had finally come to their decision saying, "For guilty of murder in slaying of Mirabile." And 9 days later, on September 27, 1959, in the newspaper, it stated, "Forgiven life imprisonment of Tony Mirabile's death." Fate is an unpredictable reality, and if Victor Francis Buono knew of the ramifications before his crimes, I strongly believe he wouldn't have made all of his wrong decisions in his later life. His decade of the 1950s brought him separation from his family, his freedom, his dignity that he once carried proudly as being a husband, father, San Diego police officer, and Bell's bondsman, owner. I truly wish I had known my step-grandfather, Victor Francis, better, because I know he had wonderful characteristics that were good. And I've always remembered the days when he took me to Belmont Park so I could ride on the wooden roller coaster overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Victor Charles Buono was 20 years old at the closing of 1959, and he was now a professional equity actor performing in Warner Brothers television programs. He would never be looked upon as he once was before, because he had entered into the magical world of creative make-believe that was broadcasting him in numerous television sets throughout of America. He had become a phenomenon to most of his family members as well. For the world he once walked in was now gone forever, and he was now untouchable to many others who have loved him since the day he was born. There were two historic entities that brought enlightenment to the world in the early 1960s. John F. Kennedy becoming the President of the United States of America on November 8, 1960, and the Beatles' first song, "I Want to Hold Your Hand," on January 18, 1964, written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Victor Charles had a similar comparison between the years of 1960 to 1964, when he rose to greatness in Hollywood. His first 5 years established him in the hearts and minds of millions of Americans who watched television and motion pictures. His first 5 years as a professional actor were definitely his golden years in Hollywood. In 1960, Bette Davis and Joan Crawford and director Robert Aldridge didn't work in any motion pictures. It was obvious that Davis and Crawford weren't in demand like their prior years before when they were younger. Aldridge also was looking around for another quality motion picture to produce and direct. On January 31st, 1960, Victor Charles was acting in the role of Sogsty in the television program Rogue for Hire. It was titled Operation Jaguar, and the executive producer was Jack J. Krause. On February 6, 1960, Victor Charles played the role of Seminard on Sea Hunt, titled Underwater Drop, and the executive producer was Evan Torres. Victor Charles, my grandma Mert, and David Francis were still living at 3266 Bayside Walk, and he was performing at the Oak Globe Theater Shakespeare Festival in July of 1960. He was in their several productions As You Like It in the role of Duke Sr., Hamlet in the role of King Claudius, and in Julius Caesar. In late September 23, 1960, Victor Charles once again played in the role of Bongo Benny in the television program 77 Sunset Strip, titled The Fanatics. The executive producer was William T. Orr. On November 14, 1960, Victor Charles was playing in the role of Mr. Beamish in the television program Surfside 6, titled Deadly Mel. The executive producer was William T. Orr. The following day, on November 15, 1960, Victor Charles played in the role of Corlick in the television program Thriller, titled Girl with a Secret. The producer was Fletcher Markle. 6 days later, on November 21st, 1960, Victor Charles was playing the role of the San Francisco bartender in the television program Sugarfoot, titled Man from Medora. The executive producer was William T. Orr. As you may notice, the name of executive producer William T. Orr, he was an important individual helping Victor Charles launch into his television career as an actor in Hollywood. As the old adage goes, it's not what you know, but it's who you know. The television program Checkmate was seen on November 26, 1960, and it was titled Moment of Truth. Victor Charles was playing the role of Carlos Rodriguez. The producer was Joseph T. Nair. Nearly a week later, on December 1st, 1960, Victor Charles was playing the role of the mayor in the television program Outlaws, titled Starfall Part 2. The executive producer was Frank Telford. Between 1959 and 1960, Victor Charles was 21 years old, and he had performed within 15 television programs and in one motion picture. The average annual salary for wage workers in America was around $5,700. The average length for a television program to be created in 1960 was approximately 1 month after casting actors, rehearsing, filming, and editing before it would be released over television. It's my estimated guess that Victor Charles may have earned at least $300 per television program, and after being in 15 television programs and one motion picture, he may have earned approximately $4,800. And being an equity professional stage actor at the Oak Globe Theater during their Shakespearean Festival from July to August in 1960, his total annual earnings would easily be over $5,000 or more. Not a bad start for a young man who never held another job in his life. Victor Charles was the breadwinner now in the Buono family, and it would be that way for the rest of his life. My father Sonny was 33 years old, and he was still a San Diego County sheriff, and my mother Hilda was 29 years old. My two sisters, Teresa was 12 years old, and Renee was 10 years old, and I was 8 years old at the end of 1960. Now that I was old enough to play in Little League Baseball at the Western League Ballpark in El Cajon, California, I went to the tryouts and I made a position on the Indians baseball team. My father was one of the coaches on my team during my first organized year of playing baseball. I can't recall ever hearing my Grandma Mert saying where our step-grandfather, Victor Francis, had gone to. I also never heard it from my father, mother, Auntie Susie, Aunt Mary Jane, Granny Grunts, or from anyone for that matter. My step-grandfather had just disappeared out of my life. We continued visiting at the Buono house. I can't remember ever seeing Victor Charles sitting quietly in the living room or kitchen. He was full of energy and had things to do and places to go. He was now 21 years old, and he was a professional television actor. He had been rubbing shoulders with Lloyd Bridges, Joan Fontaine, Nick Adams, Troy Donahue, Doug McClure, and Sebastian Cabot, and many other actors and actresses. He was now part of Hollywood, and his old friends at St. Augustine High School and the University of San Diego most likely had nothing in common with him any longer. How could they be? He was a television actor with the stars. In 1961, Victor Charles took a family photo of us in their beach house living room. Standing in the back row was Tony Edwards, my father Sonny, David Francis, my mother Hilda, and kneeling in front was my Grandma Mert and Victor Francis's sister, Elna Buono. Victor Francis's mother, Rose Buono, was sitting in a wheelchair, and sitting on the floor was my sister Renee, me, and my older sister, Teresa. How many people have the experience of having a family member who is a professional television and motion picture actor? There were approximately 180.7 million American citizens in 1961. The number of professional actors working in Hollywood was like the size of a drop of water in the ocean. Most American citizens go throughout their lives without the masses knowing who they are. But Victor Charles's name was well known by millions now, and it put him into an entirely different circle. My father Sonny was 11 years old when Victor Charles was born, and they lived together in the same houses between the years of 1938 to 1949. My father saw the good and bad behaviors of Victor Charles while he was growing up. Throughout my father's life, he spoke precious little about his experiences of when living under the same roof with Victor Francis. He once told me that Victor Charles was favored more by Victor Francis than me, because he had the Buono blood passing through his veins and he didn't. In 1961, Bette Davis was in the motion picture Pocketful of Miracles, starring Glenn Ford. It was a film by Franton Productions, and it was released on December 19, 1961. Bette Davis must have been very happy knowing Joan Crawford didn't have a motion picture that year. Frank Sinatra was slowing down a bit in 1961 with only having one motion picture that year, being The Devil at 4 O'Clock, starring Spencer Tracy. Victor Charles would soon befriend young actor Jonathan McMurtry at the Oak Globe Theater. McMurtry's name was in the San Diego Union Tribune newspaper on May 2, 2004, written by Anne Marie Welsh, and it printed, "McMurtry was 19 when he seduced a panel of judges listening to him speak Shakespeare. He was studying graphic design and working for Disney in Los Angeles when a teacher talked him into preparing for a Shakespeare competition. He won the Western Regionals with the solemn poetry of the soon-to-be deposed poet King Richard II. In New York, McMurtry tied for first in the national finals with Larry Linfield, later Frank Burns on the MASH. Their prize was a year's scholarship to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in London. Both went, but McMurtry was smitten big time. He stayed on an extra year, studying with such mentors as the Royal Shakespeare Company's John Barton and voice coach, Margaret Carrington. My Uncle Tony once told me that when he first met Jonathan McMurtry, he thought he was gay, but that was only Tony's opinion. I believe Jonathan McMurtry gave this quaint confession of being gay when he was a young and pretty man in the newspaper article written by Anne Marie Welsh. Victor Charles and Jonathan had a very close relationship in the early 1960s, and they most likely may have had sexual affairs as well. My Uncle Tony also said to me when he and David Francis weren't driving Victor Charles up to Hollywood, it was Jonathan McMurtry who was behind the steering wheel. Victor Charles didn't have a license then, and he didn't know how to drive a vehicle until later in the 1960s. I personally spoke with Jonathan McMurtry in a diner over a cup of coffee in the early 1990s, and after having a long conversation about acting, and when going home, I thought that Victor Charles couldn't have had a better friend and lover as Jonathan McMurtry. Victor Charles played the role of Mr. Moon in the television program The Untouchables on April 20th, 1961, and the executive producer was Cherry Thrope. When Victor Charles played Mr. Moon in The Untouchables, there were many eyes recognizing him as a talented actor, and in newspaper clippings, they described the similarities between Buono and Krieger, saying, "Moon is played by newcomer Victor Buono, a man who may take Laird Krieger's place in the movie business." I would guess most people never heard the name of Lord Gurger. I personally never had. Lord Gurger was born on July 28, 1913, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. When he was 24 years old in 1938, Victor Charles was just born, and Lord acted at the Pasadena Playhouse in the stage production of Oscar Wilde, written by Leslie and Sewell Stokes. A fellow actor named Thomas Brown Henry at the Pasadena Playhouse gave Lord Gregor this advice: don't lose a pound of weight, but instead to develop a thin man's personality. Another similarity between Buono and Krieger was that they were 6'3" tall, and they both weighed around 300 pounds. Legend actor John Barrymore witnessed Lord Gurger's performance in the production Oscar Wilde, and he later said, "Krieger was one of the most gifted young stage actors in the past 10 years. In 1942, Lord Gregor was in the stage production of The Man Who Came to Dinner. And 17 years later, Victor Charles would be acting at the Oak Globe Theater in the same production of The Man Who Came to Dinner. Then in 1943, he was having a homosexual affair with a young actor named David Bacon, and when Darrell Zanuck of 20th Century Fox found out that he was having an affair with a man, Zanuck then had an article written in the New Silver Screen magazine that Lord Gregor was currently having a romantic relationship with actress Dorothy McGuire. This also is a similarity of two talented and large men actors, Buono and Gregor, being gay, who were protected by Hollywood movie studios, covering up any condemning sexual episodes that might hit the newspapers. In the process of growing lighter and thinner, he had a severe abdominal difficulties, and he soon had a heart attack and died on December 9th, 1944. Victor Charles's third television program on Sea Hunt, titled Underwater Drop, he was playing the role of Seminard, and it was aired on February 6, 1960. 2 days later, on February 8, 1960, actor Lord Gregor received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame at 1716 Vine Street in Hollywood, California. This, too, was an amazing similarity of these two talented actors having the same height and weight and sexual preference, and they both were mirrored alike with greatness as well. On April 21st, 1961, Victor Charles played the role of Clatter Lamont in the television program Michel Shane, titled The Trouble with Ernie. The producer was Anthony Ellis. 7 days later, Victor Charles was in the television program Harrigan and Son, titled The Case of the Missing Case. His role was Dr. Blaine, and it was released on April 28, 1961. Within a week, Victor Charles was in Harrigan and Son again on May 5, 1961, titled Hands is Hot. And on May 14, 1961, Victor Charles's agent, Jerry Rosen, recruited him to read at the Valley City's Jewish Community Center in a play titled Exodus. Soon thereafter, Victor Charles was in another Sea Hunt on July 29, 1961, titled The Saint Story, and playing in the role of Dr. Tank Wallace. The executive producer was Ivan Torres. Once again, Victor Charles performs as Dr. Blaine in the television program Harrigan and Son, titled The Testimony, on September 29, 1961. On October 6, 1961, Victor Charles was in the television program Target, The Corruptors, titled Pier 60. His role was Winston Preston Manners, and it was produced by Leonard Ackerman. The motion picture Judgment at Nuremberg hit the silver screens on December 18, 1961, and starring the golden cast of Spencer Tracy, Burt Lancaster, Judy Garland, and Richard Widmark. Victor Charles had the opportunity to rub shoulders with this classic group of actors, even though he only played the role of a courtroom spectator without any dialogue, and he was listed as uncredited with his name not showing. It was directed and produced by Stanley Kramer. The last television motion picture and stage performance in 1961 for Victor Charles was 77 Sunset Strip, titled Bullet for Santa, on December 22, 1961. His role was Charlie Case, and the executive producer was William T. Orr. From December 29, 1959, When Victor Charles was first seen performing in a television program, he had performed in a total of 29 television programs and 2 motion pictures by the end of 1961. He was only 22 years old, and he was still living at 3266 Bayside Walk with his mother Myrtle Bell Buono, Tony Edwards, and his younger brother David Francis. My father, Sonny, was now a narcotic detective with the San Diego County Sheriff Department, and he was 33 years old at the end of 1961. When looking back at my father's choices in life, there was a similarity between him and his stepfather, Victor Francis. Victor Francis was 34 years old when he first became a San Diego police officer and later became a vice squad officer. In looking back, my father mirrored Victor Francis's steps in life more than he would have ever thought before. At the end of 1961, I wonder if Victor Charles thought about his acting in television and Hollywood. Did he think he would only be a television actor? His work in television paid his bills for him, but he wasn't earning the wages of a motion picture star. Did he think he would be living in San Diego for the rest of his life and having to commute back and forth to Hollywood? In 1962, all these questions would be answered, and he soon would be seeing the chance of a lifetime when whatever happened to baby Jane came knocking on his door. The year of 1962 started off just like the last 2 years with him acting in the television program The New Breed, titled Cross the Little Line. He played the role of Manerick, and the executive producer was Quinn Martin. Victor Charles was now 23 years old and was still living near South Mission Beach, and he was earning a living as a television actor. He probably thought producers might grow tired and bored of hearing his voice and looking at his face. If you noticed when reading the newspaper clippings of his last 30 television programs, you hardly saw his name in print. He still wasn't a big name to most people when sitting around their kitchen tables in the morning. On January 18, 1962, he played in the role of Parnese in the television program The Untouchables, titled The Gang War. The executive producer was Alan Armour. Victor Charles landed the role of Alexander in the television program Perry Mason, titled The Case of the Absent Artist, on March 17, 1962. The executive producer was Gail Patrick Jackson. Once again, Victor Charles returned to one of his first television programs that started his Hollywood career in 77 Sunset Strip, titled The Disappearance. He played the role of Stannison, and the executive producer was, yes, it was William T. Orr on April 27, 1962. We have to remember, Victor Charles was taught in the classic words and storylines of William Shakespeare. The words and emotions he exuded to audiences were greatly profound and deeply meaningful. The vast number of television programs he had already performed didn't come close to the genius of William Shakespeare's plays. I've always noticed the tone and cadence Victor Charles spoke in every television role he played. He always spoke with a Shakespearean tone and manner, much like Sir John Falstaff from Shakespeare's classic Henry IV, Part 1. This is partly why he was quite unique, because most of the other leading and supporting actors never spoke with that Shakespearean accent when playing a character. With the facial expressions Granny Grunts had taught him as a young boy and his reciting poetry of words of Shakespeare taught to him by Father John R. Ahern, he was forged into becoming a classic actor. But unfortunately, he had to speak the words of the numbed-brained television scripts in order to make a living. Victor Charles performed with Lisa Clark at the Old Globe Theatre early in the season of 1962 in the play The Gazebo, written by Alec Coppel, in a book titled Vampire and Her Daughters, Women Horror Movie Hosts from the 1950s. Lisa Clark wrote, "She has appeared in local San Diego theater productions, perhaps the most outstanding being her appearance at the Old Globe in The Gazebo opposite Victor Buono. We shall see throughout Victor Charles's career that he would receive more illustrious reviews when acting on a stage instead of in television and motion pictures. It's the richness of the words that are written for play and character, and far more in quality for actors and for productions." Victor Charles performed in all of the 3 Shakespearean plays: Taming of the Shrew, Henry IV, Part 2, and Othello in the 1962 season. This would be his last time acting at the Old Globe Theatre Shakespeare Festival until coming back in 1974 to play Sir John Falstaff. Once again, when following the careers of Bette Davis, Joan Crawford, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and director Robert Aldridge, we will soon see how each of them would influence Victor Charles's acting career and turning him into a Hollywood star. Both Davis and Crawford were entering that unfortunate time when actresses have grown older and their images losing their brightness. As for Victor Charles, he wasn't known as an up-and-coming superstar in motion pictures yet, and in minds of many, he appeared to be a great gamble for director Robert Aldridge. All 3 of them, Davis, Crawford, and Buono, all carried luggage that easily could sink a ship, but Warner Brothers stood firmly behind Robert Aldridge's talent and good sense. Director Robert Aldridge stands alone from others who opened the door for Victor Charles to become a Hollywood television and motion picture star. There were 4 other strong and influencing mentors that forged him in his life, but Aldridge was the one holding the golden key that opened the door for Victor Charles's career. First, it was his grandmother, Myrtle Keller Boldovich. I called her Granny Grunts when growing up, and she encouraged him how to act with his facial expressions and his articulate tones of words he spoke. And there was his father, Victor Francis, who introduced him to various men from the Sicilian culture of the mafia. He may have learned at 15 years old their vocal tones, characteristics, and physical poises. In doing so, Victor Charles may have learned how to be a much older person than he truly was, and he would never be intimidated by anyone else by carrying the confidence and stature of a more mature man. Then there was Father John R. Ahern at St. Augustine High School, who taught him to love the poetic words of William Shakespeare. He also was the first director to teach him in the disciplines of how to stand on a stage and gracefully move downstage or up. Father Ahern also shined a bright light in Victor Charles's heart and mind with his religious beliefs that helped him to make important decisions throughout his life. Director Craig Knoll of the Old Globe Theater saw Victor Charles performing at the San Diego Junior Theater in 1953, and he immediately noticed his skills as an actor. It wouldn't be long until he would be directing him in Ben Jonson play Faupoon in 1956 at the Old Globe Theater, and he helped Victor Charles to win the Atlas Globe Award for Best Actor of the Year. Peggy Kellner was his first female friend to show him the ropes of becoming a professional actor. She was director Craig Knoll's right-hand woman who could do absolutely everything at the Old Globe Theater. She was an actress, director, set designer, and she was a world-class costume designer, too. I had the great pleasure in 1974 visiting with Victor Charles and her at the Old Globe Theater. When seeing and hearing them talking and laughing in the costume department that day, it was clear to me that they would be friends for their entire lives as best buddies. And that is exactly what happened. The one man in Hollywood who would change Victor Charles' life was director Robert Aldridge. He once said he noticed Victor Charles acting in the role of Mr. Moon in the television program The Untouchables. Aldridge had thousands of actors to choose from in Hollywood to play the role of Edwin Flegg in his new 1962 motion picture, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. It wasn't a leading role or even a lengthy supporting role, but it required having a man who was a mommy's boy under the thumb of a dominating mum. Director Robert Aldridge didn't only choose the right actor, but he directed Victor Charles like no other film director ever did again. Victor Charles had a habit of quickly amusing others throughout his career in television and motion pictures. Aldridge successfully drew the borders around Edwin Flegg, and he kept Victor Charles confidently performing inside his character. He didn't play to the audience to get a laugh, but he was acting within and creating a real human being in the disturbing environment that Bette Davis was creating. If Victor Charles hadn't received the role of Edwin Flegg, he most likely would have only worked in television, and he might have retreated back onto the theater stage. Fate is fickle, and at 23 years old, Victor Charles unknowingly didn't know the god of actors was smiling upon him. When Whatever Happened to Baby Jane finished filming, Warner Brothers didn't quite know what they had to give to the viewing public. They came up with the idea of screening it throughout America in numerous private previews to small audiences. Newspapers were printing round trips for 3 couples other to Hollywood or to New York City will be the grand prizes in the nationwide patron contest developed by the Hollywood Preview Committee of Theater Owners of America for the engagement of Warner Brothers Motion Picture, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Most of the early newspaper clippings focused primarily on Bette Davis and Joan Crawford because it was their first time acting together in the same motion picture. And that obviously brought many of their fans to want to come and see them. Victor Charles had to endure numerous newspaper clippings throughout his entire career, having to read descriptions in print of his being 6'3" and 350 pounds. It was always a reminder that he wasn't like all the rest of the skinny people in America who were supposedly normal, and they made him feel like an oddity in a freak show. In one of the newspapers that were reviewing his performance as Edwin Flagg, they wrote, "The repulsive giant, or the giant who plays a repulsive role, is Victor Buono, who is being introduced here and whom you cannot miss." But they couldn't resist from saying he was a repulsive giant. He soon got his due of appreciation when the newspapers printed how Bette and Joan made Buono a star. Victor Buono is proof positive that it takes plenty of guts to become a movie star, and no pun meant. When Victor Charles was asked how he felt acting with Bette Davis and Joan Crawford, he commented, "I felt like an altar boy invited to the council in Rome." He also said, "I found out the bigger they are, the more they help you in subtle, professional ways. I still can't believe it's me emoting with 2 such stars. The awe is still there, but the fear has vanished." Associated Press writer James Bacon gave a superb and completely honest description of Victor Charles's experience when performing side by side with 2 of the most legendary motion picture actresses, Davis and Crawford, at that time in 1962. Many great stars on the stage, in television and motion pictures were brought into greatness by powerful people holding the keys to open their doors to enter into Hollywood. Victor Charles is definitely one of those fortunate ones who didn't just walk into fame, but he was catapulted there. Once they arrive through the glorious door of fame, nothing can ever take it away from them. They can possibly be tarnished, but they will always be a star. Here is a couple of headlining newspaper titles about Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. The first one was in the Democrat and Chronicle newspaper on December 2nd, 1962, and it printed, "The Fat Man with Bette and Joan. Did Victor Buono steal the picture?" The second was in the Star Tribune on December 2nd, 1962, and it printed, "Meet a 300-pound scene stealer. Victor Buono has a face for every occasion." On January 20th, 1963, Robert Aldridge signed a contract with Warner Brothers to direct the up-and-coming motion picture Four for Texas, starring Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin. The door to success for Victor Charles hadn't just opened up, but it was kicked wide open and ushering him into a celebrity circle of dreams. When a new star performs with great actors, it's nearly impossible not to have greatness rubbing off onto their shoulders. He would no longer be seen as a struggling television actor hoping to earn enough money to put gas in his car, food in his refrigerator, and paying his house mortgage. Victor Charles was now a Hollywood star, and no one could ever take that away from him throughout his entire career. Sometime between 1962 and 1963, during the months of being in the motion picture Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, he moved out of the 3266 Bayside Walk house and he purchased a house in Encino, California. He now was one of them, among the stars of Hollywood. He now counted himself being a true professional television and motion picture actor in Hollywood. He would never live in San Diego again, and in 1963, he put all of his dark memories behind him. My Grandma Mert, my Uncle David Francis, and Uncle Tony now considered the Encino house as their new home. On March 24, 1963, the motion picture Whatever Happened to Baby Jane had been selected by France as an entry in their Cannes Film Festival after winning 5 nominations to the upcoming Academy Awards in 1963. Can you imagine how Victor Charles must have felt when hearing he was nominated by the Academy Awards for Best Supporting Actor? He was only 23 years old and hadn't finished college yet, and he was sandwiched in between 2 of the greatest actresses, Davis and Crawford. It's no wonder when my Uncle Tony told me that Victor Charles didn't have many lasting friends throughout his life. Most 23-year-old men in 1963 were only working for a buck to take a young lady out for a date and saving money to fix up their broken cars. Victor Charles had just spent months working in a motion picture with Bette Davis, Joan Crawford, and director Robert Aldridge, and the spotlight of fame was shining on him. Realistically, what kind of discussion could Victor Charles honestly have with an old school buddy telling Victor that he got new tires for his car and changed his spark plugs so he could take Bonnie Brown out for hamburgers and watching a flick at the local drive-in theater? I can just see Victor Charles rolling his head saying, "Oh, that's nice. Did you have fun?" Victor Charles's name was soon being read in newspapers. 1963 Academy Awards and nominated Best Supporting Actors Omar Sharif and Victor Buono. If Robert Aldridge had cast Peter Lawford instead of Victor Charles in playing the role of Edwin Flagg in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, where would Victor Charles be then? He probably would still be living in San Diego, acting at the Old Globe Theater, and performing in television programs earning a living. There's nothing wrong with that, but he wouldn't have had the limelight of greatness surrounding him. In 1963, he wasn't just an ordinary actor kicking around Hollywood making a few bucks acting in television, but he was now playing with superstar singers of Capitol Records. Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, who perform on Las Vegas stages and who were two of the most popular motion picture actors in Hollywood. He first was surrounded by Bette Davis and Joan Crawford, and now he was in the company of Hollywood giants. Victor Charles was still only 23 years old, and people throughout America were now sitting around their kitchen tables saying the name Victor Buono. He had almost gone as far as to Mars, away from the days of being a student at St. Augustine High School in San Diego. On the 35th Academy Awards night on April 8, 1963, the 5 nominees for Best Supporting Actor were Ed Begley in Sweet Bird of Youth, Victor Buono in What Happened to Baby Jane, Telly Savalas in Birdman of Alcatraz, Omar Sharif in Lawrence of Arabia, and Terence Stamp in Billy Budd. As Victor Charles sat in the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium with legendary actors and actresses on that night, he had to be giggling inside, knowing even if he didn't win the Oscar, he still would be a winner and still playing in the high stakes of Hollywood. He was the only 23 years old actor in America standing on a pedestal in Hollywood, and when he would woke up in the morning, he knew America would know the name Victor Charles Buono. The winner that night on April 8, 1963, for Best Supporting Actor was Ed Begley in the motion picture Sweet Bird of Youth. I often wonder what my step-grandfather Victor Francis must have thought that night. Knowing Victor Charles Buono, his son, was a Hollywood celebrity, I personally believe he was tremendously proud of his son, and he even may have cried with joy that night.